30 experts failed until a 6-year-old girl solved the $800 million problem in 1 minute. CEO turned pale, and it changed his life. Before we share this touching account of despair and solitude, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more powerful stories. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime on the 47th floor of Harrison Tech Industries, revealing the most luxurious corporate suite in downtown Seattle. CEO Jonathan Harrison, a sharp-featured man in his early 40s, strode confidently toward the mahogany conference table where 30 of the world's most brilliant minds sat in tense silence. The air was thick with desperation and failure. "Gentlemen," Jonathan's voice cut through the room like ice. "It's been 6 months since our quantum computing division discovered this critical flaw in our new processor design. 6 months of watching our stock price plummet while our competitors gain ground." He slammed a thick file onto the table, making several consultants jump. $800 million in research and development down the drain if we can't solve this encryption bug by tomorrow's board meeting. Dr. Mitchell Chen, the lead consultant from MIT, cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Harrison, we've run every possible diagnostic. The quantum entanglement protocol keeps failing at the 0.7 nanosecond mark. It's mathematically impossible to—" "Don't give me impossible!" Jonathan's face reddened. "I didn't build this company by accepting defeat. That processor was supposed to revolutionize cybersecurity for every major bank in America. Instead, it's become our biggest nightmare." He paced behind the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Seattle skyline stretching endlessly below. "Every one of you came highly recommended. Harvard, Stanford, Cambridge, millions in consulting fees, and what do I have to show for it?" The room fell silent, except for the gentle hum of air conditioning. These weren't ordinary problem solvers. They were the elite: quantum physicists, computer scientists, encryption specialists. Yet for 6 months, they'd been stumped by a bug so complex it seemed to defy logic itself. Dr. Sarah Williams from Caltech spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, perhaps if we had another month to analyze the quantum state fluctuations." "We don't have another month," Jonathan interrupted, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his leather chair. "The Pentagon contract alone is worth $2 billion. If we can't deliver a working prototype by tomorrow, they'll award it to our competitors in China. Do you understand what that means? Not just for this company, but for American technological security." Outside, storm clouds gathered over Elliott Bay, casting dark shadows across the conference room. The weight of failure hung heavy in the air. These 30 experts represented the pinnacle of human intelligence, yet they sat defeated, surrounded by whiteboards covered in complex equations that led nowhere, computer screens displaying error messages that mocked their efforts. Jonathan moved to the massive window, staring down at the tiny figures moving along the sidewalks far below. Somewhere down there, regular people lived their simple lives, unaware that the fate of an $800 million project rested in this room. "I want solutions, not excuses," he said quietly, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. "Find me an answer, or find yourselves new careers." As if summoned by his words, his assistant knocked softly and entered. "Mr. Harrison, there's a situation downstairs in the lobby. Security called. There's a woman causing a disturbance, claiming she needs to speak with you urgently. She has a child with her." Jonathan didn't turn around. "Handle it. I don't have time for—" "Sir," the assistant interrupted carefully, "she says her name is Maria Santos. She used to work here." The name hit Jonathan like a physical blow. Maria Santos. The cleaning lady he'd fired 3 weeks ago after that incident with the security breach. But that wasn't his concern now. Nothing mattered except solving this impossible puzzle that threatened to destroy everything he'd built. Maria Santos stood in the gleaming marble lobby of Harrison Tech Industries, her weathered hands trembling as she held her 6-year-old daughter Emma close. The child's wide brown eyes took in the spectacular surroundings: crystal chandeliers, flowing water features, and walls lined with awards celebrating the company's innovations. But Emma could sense her mother's distress, the way her voice shook when she spoke to the stern-faced security guards. "Please, I just need 5 minutes," Maria pleaded, her accent thick with emotion. "I know Mr. Harrison is busy, but this is about justice, about truth." Her uniform from her new cleaning job at the mall was wrinkled from the long bus ride across town. The pay was half what she'd earned at Harrison Tech, and the hours were brutal, but it was all she could find after being blacklisted from most downtown office buildings. The head of security, a large man with cold eyes, crossed his arms. "Ma'am, we've been through this. You were terminated for cause. There's nothing more to discuss. You need to leave now or I'll have to call the police." Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, why are they being mean to you?" Maria knelt down, smoothing her daughter's dark hair. "Sometimes, Mija, people make mistakes about other people, but we have to keep trying to show them the truth." She'd been doing exactly that for 3 weeks, applying for jobs, trying to explain to potential employers why she'd been fired, watching doors close in her face again and again. The security guard's radio crackled to life. "Rodriguez, bring her up. Mr. Harrison wants to see what this is about." As they rode the elevator to the 47th floor, Emma pressed her face to the glass wall, watching the city shrink below them. "Mama, are we going to see the man who made you cry?" Maria's heart clenched. She'd tried to hide her tears from Emma, but children see everything. For 3 weeks, she'd been fighting not just for her reputation, but for her daughter's future. The accusation that she'd leaked confidential information to competitors wasn't just false, it was destroying their lives. The severance pay had barely covered 2 weeks of rent, and their savings were gone. The elevator doors opened to reveal Jonathan Harrison himself, his expensive suit immaculate, his face a mask of barely contained impatience. Behind him, through the glass walls of the conference room, Maria could see dozens of men in suits hunched over computers and complex diagrams. "Mrs. Santos," Jonathan's voice was clipped, professional. "You have 2 minutes. I'm in the middle of a critical situation." Maria straightened her shoulders, drawing strength from Emma's small hand in hers. "Mr. Harrison, I never stole anything from your company. The security footage from that night, you need to look at it again. I was cleaning the server room when I found something wrong with one of the computers. I wrote a note and left it for the IT department, but—" "The investigation was thorough," Jonathan interrupted. "The breach happened on your shift, in an area you had access to. The evidence was clear, but you didn't listen to me." Maria's composure finally cracked. "I tried to tell you about the strange patterns I saw on the screen, the numbers that didn't look right. I've been cleaning offices for 15 years, Mr. Harrison. I know when something is different, when something is wrong, but nobody cared what a cleaning lady had to say." Emma watched the exchange with the intense focus that only children possess, her young mind processing everything, her mother's pain, the powerful man's dismissal, the desperation that had brought them here. In her small purse, she still carried the crumpled note her mother had written that night, the one that had somehow started all their troubles. Jonathan glanced at his watch impatiently. Every second spent on this conversation was time away from solving the crisis that threatened his company's future. But something in Maria's voice, a raw honesty that cut through his frustration, made him pause. Behind her, the small girl with the serious brown eyes watched him with an intensity that was unsettling. "Mrs. Santos, I understand you're upset, but rehashing this won't change. Show him the paper, Mama," Emma said suddenly, her clear voice cutting through the tension. She reached into her small backpack and pulled out a folded, slightly stained piece of paper. "The one you wrote that night, the one with all the numbers." Maria's face flushed. "Emma, no, this isn't the time." But Emma had already stepped forward, holding the paper up to Jonathan with the fearless determination that only children possess. "My mama isn't a thief. She found something broken and tried to help. She always helps people." Jonathan took the paper reluctantly, more out of politeness than genuine interest. It was a cleaning supply request form, but on the back, Maria had scrawled a series of numbers and symbols in pencil. His eyes scanned the childish handwriting dismissively until something made him stop cold. The numbers weren't random. They were timestamps, processor cycle times, and in the margin, Maria had written in broken English, "Computer screen showing same numbers over and over. Clock time not matching system time, maybe broken." Jonathan's hand began to tremble as he read the notation more carefully. These weren't just random observations, they were describing a timing synchronization error, a loop in the quantum processing cycle that would cause exactly the kind of encryption failure his team had been fighting for 6 months. Where exactly did you see these numbers?" he asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. Maria stepped closer, pointing to her notes. "Server room B, the big computer in the corner. Every night when I cleaned, I noticed the screen. Always the same pattern. But the timestamp never changed. I thought maybe the clock was broken, so I wrote down what I saw." Jonathan's mind raced. Server room B housed their quantum processing prototype. The timing discrepancy Maria had observed, it could be the source of the entire problem. While 30 brilliant scientists had been analyzing complex algorithms and theoretical physics, a cleaning lady had spotted the fundamental issue, a simple clock synchronization error that created a cascade failure in the quantum encryption process. "You said the timestamp never changed," Jonathan pressed, his executive demeanor cracking. "You mean it stayed the same number while the system clock advanced?" "See, exactly," Maria nodded eagerly, like the computer was stuck, repeating the same moment over and over. "I thought it was strange, but who listens to the cleaning lady?" Emma watched as the powerful man's face transformed from impatience to shock to something that looked almost like wonder. She didn't understand the technical words, but she understood people. And right now, this man was realizing something very important. Jonathan looked at the paper again, then at Maria, then at the small girl who had insisted on showing him what everyone else had dismissed. The solution to his $800 million problem had been sitting in a child's backpack for 3 weeks. "Mrs. Santos," he said quietly, "I need you to tell me everything you remember about that night, every detail." The conference room had never felt more electric with tension as Jonathan burst through the doors, clutching Maria's crumpled note. The 30 experts looked up from their calculations and complex diagrams, confusion evident on their faces as they watched their CEO stride to the front of the room with a cleaning lady and a small child in tow. "Everyone, stop what you're doing," Jonathan commanded, his voice carrying an urgency that made everyone freeze mid-conversation. Dr. Chen opened his mouth to speak, but Jonathan held up his hand. "For 6 months, we've been approaching this quantum encryption bug from every conceivable angle. Theoretical physics, advanced mathematics, quantum mechanics. We've missed something so fundamental that someone without technical training spotted it immediately." He taped Maria's note to the whiteboard, the simple handwriting looking almost primitive next to the complex equations that covered every other surface. "Mrs. Santos, tell them what you told me." Maria's voice shook as she faced the room of intimidating intellectuals. I don't understand computers like you do, but every night when I cleaned server room B, I watched the big screen because it was pretty, all those moving numbers and colors. But one thing never moved. The time number in the corner, it always said the same thing, even though the clock on the wall kept changing. Dr. Williams leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "You're describing a timestamp freeze, but that's impossible with our current system architecture." "Is it?" Jonathan turned to face his team. "We've been so focused on the quantum entanglement protocols that we never questioned the basic timing mechanisms. What if the processor is caught in a temporal loop at the hardware level?" Emma, who had been quietly observing from beside her mother, suddenly spoke up. "Like when my video game gets stuck and keeps playing the same part over and over." The room fell silent. Dr. Chen's face went pale as the implication hit him. If the quantum processor's internal clock is desynchronized from the system clock, it would create exactly the kind of cascade failure we've been seeing. The encryption keys would be generated based on faulty temporal data, Creating an infinite loop in the verification process, Dr. Williams finished, her voice barely a whisper. My God, it's so simple. Jonathan moved to the window, staring down at the city below. 3 weeks ago, he'd destroyed an innocent woman's life because he'd been too proud, too certain of his own systems to listen. The security investigation had found evidence of the breach on Maria's shift in the area she cleaned, but they'd never considered that she might have been trying to report a problem, not cause one. How long would it take to run a diagnostic on the timestamp synchronization? He asked, not turning from the window. 30 minutes, maybe less, Dr. Chen replied, already moving toward his laptop. If Mrs. Santos is right, the fix could be implemented within hours. Maria watched in amazement as the room exploded into activity. These brilliant minds, who had been stumped for half a year, were now working with sudden purpose and excitement. Emma tugged on her mother's hand. Mama, did we help them? Before Maria could answer, Jonathan turned from the window. His face had transformed. The cold, corporate mask replaced by something raw and human. Mrs. Santos, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my company's future. And Emma, he knelt down to the little girl's level. You might have just saved $800 million by making sure your mama's voice was heard. The room buzzed with activity as the world's top experts raced to test a theory proposed by a 6-year-old's simple observation. Sometimes the most complex problems had the simplest solutions. They just needed someone humble enough to see them. 27 minutes later, the conference room had transformed into a scene of barely controlled chaos. Dr. Chen's fingers flew across his keyboard while 3 other scientists crowded around his monitor, watching lines of code scroll past at lightning speed. The diagnostic was running exactly as Maria had described. The quantum processor's internal timestamp was indeed frozen at 0.7 nanoseconds, creating an infinite verification loop that corrupted every encryption attempt. There it is, Dr. Williams breathed, pointing at the screen. The temporal desynchronization is causing a cascade failure in the quantum key generation protocol. Mrs. Santos, you observed something that our most sophisticated monitoring systems missed. Jonathan stood beside Maria and Emma, watching his team work with an efficiency born of sudden hope. For the first time in 6 months, the atmosphere in the room was electric with possibility rather than defeat. But his mind wasn't entirely on the technical breakthrough. It was on the profound injustice he'd committed. Mrs. Santos, he said quietly, 3 weeks ago, when security found evidence of the breach on your shift, I made assumptions. I let my fear of corporate espionage blind me to what you were actually trying to do. Maria's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for weeks. I just wanted to help. When I saw something wrong, I wrote it down like my supervisor told us to do if we noticed anything unusual. But when the security people found my note, they said I was trying to steal information. Emma looked up at Jonathan with the directness that only children possess. Why didn't you believe my mama? She always tells the truth. The question hit Jonathan like a physical blow. Why hadn't he believed her? Because she was a cleaning lady. Because she didn't have a PhD from an Ivy League school. Because in his world of corporate power and advanced technology, he'd forgotten that wisdom could come from the most unexpected sources. Emma, I made a terrible mistake, Jonathan said, kneeling to meet the child's gaze. I thought I knew everything because I was the boss. But your mama saw something that 30 of the smartest people in the world missed. Sometimes the most important truths come from people who see things differently. Dr. Chen suddenly shouted from across the room, We've got it! The fix is uploading now! The room erupted in cheers as months of frustration and failure transformed into triumph. Computer screens that had shown nothing but error messages for half a year now displayed successful encryption protocols, quantum keys generating flawlessly, processing speeds that exceeded their wildest projections. But Jonathan's attention remained focused on the woman and child who had made it all possible. Mrs. Santos, I want to offer you your job back, with full back pay and a formal apology. But more than that, I want to offer you a position in our quality assurance department. Your ability to notice what others miss is exactly what this company needs. Maria's hand flew to her mouth in shock. But I don't have training in computers, Mr. Harrison. I'm just a cleaning lady. You're someone who sees details that billion-dollar diagnostic systems miss, Jonathan replied firmly. Technical skills can be taught. The kind of observational intelligence you possess is rare and invaluable. Emma bounced on her toes with excitement. Mama, does this mean we don't have to worry about the rent anymore? The innocent question brought tears to Jonathan's eyes. While he'd been focused on stock prices and board meetings, this family had been struggling to survive because of his hasty judgment. The $800 million this breakthrough would save suddenly seemed less important than the profound lesson a 6-year-old girl had just taught him about listening, really listening, to people regardless of their position or background. Around them, the world's top scientists continued celebrating their technical victory. But Jonathan knew the real triumph was much deeper than solving a quantum computing problem. 6 months later, Jonathan Harrison stood at the same floor-to-ceiling windows of his office. But the view seemed entirely different now. The Seattle skyline sparkled in the morning sun, and far below he could see people beginning their daily routines, each one carrying their own stories, their own wisdom, their own potential contributions that might change the world. Maria Santos knocked gently on his door before entering, carrying a tablet filled with her latest quality assurance reports. In 6 months, she'd identified 17 potential issues that the technical teams had overlooked, saving the company millions in prevented errors. Her keen eye for patterns and details had become legendary throughout the building. The new quantum security system is running perfectly across all client installations, Maria reported, her confidence growing stronger every day. No timing discrepancies, no synchronization errors. The Pentagon contract is ahead of schedule. And Emma? Jonathan asked with genuine interest. How is she adjusting to the new school? Maria's face lit up with maternal pride. She loves it. The private academy you recommended has a wonderful science program. Yesterday she came home asking about quantum physics. She paused, a gentle smile crossing her features. She wants to understand how her observation helped save the company. Through the office windows, they could see the school playground in the distance where Emma was spending her summer break in an advanced learning program. The child who had once carried her mother's crucial note in a small backpack was now carrying textbooks about computer science and physics, her natural curiosity nurtured by the opportunities that had opened up after that pivotal day. Jonathan moved to his desk, where Maria's original crumpled note now sat framed, not as a trophy, but as a daily reminder. You know, I've been thinking about that day for months. 30 of the world's brightest minds, 6 months of failure, and the solution came from someone willing to ask simple questions and observe carefully. Sometimes we see things differently when we're not looking for complicated answers, Maria replied thoughtfully. When you're cleaning offices late at night, you notice the small things that don't belong. A timestamp that never changes, a pattern that seems wrong. The intercom buzzed softly. Mr. Harrison, the board meeting is ready to begin. They're excited to hear the final report on the quantum project's success. As Maria gathered her reports, Jonathan reflected on how profoundly his perspective had changed. The company's stock had reached record highs. The Pentagon contract had led to additional government partnerships worth billions, and their quantum security technology was now the industry standard. But the real transformation had been personal. Maria, before you go, Emma's college fund has been established as we discussed. Full scholarships through graduate school in recognition of her contribution to the company. Mr. Harrison, that's too generous. She's just a child who spoke up at the right moment. She's a child who reminded us that truth can come from anywhere and wisdom doesn't require credentials. That lesson is worth more than $800 million. As Maria left for her rounds, Jonathan prepared for the board meeting that would celebrate their greatest corporate success. But he knew the real victory wasn't measured in dollars or stock prices. It was measured in a family's restored dignity, a child's bright future, and a CEO's recovered humanity. The 6-year-old girl who had solved their impossible problem in 1 minute had given them something far more valuable than a technical solution. She had given them a new way of seeing, a new way of listening, and a new understanding that innovation and wisdom could emerge from the most unexpected places. Outside his window, the city hummed with millions of stories waiting to be heard, millions of voices that might hold the next breakthrough, the next solution, the next moment of profound truth that could change everything. 2 years after that life-changing day in the conference room, Emma Santos, now 8 years old, sat in the advanced science classroom of Seattle's most prestigious private academy, her dark eyes focused intently on the quantum physics demonstration her teacher was conducting. The other children, mostly from wealthy tech families, watched with varying degrees of interest, but Emma absorbed every word with the intensity of someone who had seen firsthand how simple observations could change everything. "Who can tell me what happens when quantum particles become entangled, Mrs. Peterson asked, holding up a complex diagram of spinning electrons. Emma's hand shot up immediately. They share information instantly, no matter how far apart they are, like they're connected by an invisible thread that can't be broken. Her classmates turned to look at her with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. Despite being 2 years younger than most of them, Emma consistently demonstrated an intuitive understanding of complex concepts that amazed her teachers. After class, Emma walked through the marble hallways of Harrison Academy, the new educational wing that Jonathan Harrison had funded specifically for children from underprivileged backgrounds who showed exceptional promise. The walls were lined with photos of successful graduates, but Emma's favorite was the simple framed note in the main lobby, her mother's original observation about the timestamp error, displayed alongside a plaque that read, "Innovation comes from those who dare to see differently." Her mother Maria was waiting in the pickup area, but she wasn't alone. Dr. Chen from Harrison Tech stood beside her, holding a thick folder and wearing the excited expression that Emma had learned meant someone had made an important discovery. "Emma!" Dr. Chen called out as she approached. "Perfect timing! I have something incredible to show you both." He opened the folder to reveal complex blueprints and technical specifications. "Remember the quantum security system your observation helped create? Well, it's been adapted for medical use. We're about to revolutionize how doctors detect diseases at the cellular level." Emma studied the diagrams with the same careful attention she'd given to her mother's original note years ago. "These patterns look familiar," she said slowly, tracing her finger along the wavelength representations. "They remind me of the ripples we studied in physics class. When you drop a stone in water, the circles get bigger, but they stay connected to the center." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. Maria had warned him about Emma's uncanny ability to spot connections that others missed, but witnessing it firsthand was still remarkable. That's exactly right, Emma. The quantum particles create ripples in what we call the quantum field, and diseased cells disrupt those patterns in predictable ways. As they drove home through the Seattle traffic, Maria reflected on how dramatically their lives had transformed. The modest apartment they'd once struggled to afford had been replaced by a comfortable house in a safe neighborhood. But more importantly, Emma's natural curiosity was being nurtured rather than dismissed, her questions welcomed rather than ignored. "Mama," Emma said from the back seat, "Dr. Chen mentioned that some doctors don't believe the new medical scanner will work because it seems too simple. Why do smart people sometimes not believe simple answers?" Maria glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror, struck once again by the child's ability to cut straight to the heart of complex issues. "Sometimes, Mika, when people know a lot about complicated things, They forget that simple truths can be the most powerful ones. They think if something isn't difficult to understand, it can't be important. Like when you saw the broken computer clock, but the computer experts didn't believe you. Exactly like that. Maria pulled into their driveway, noticing the black sedan parked across the street that had been there for the past 3 days. She'd mentioned it to Jonathan's security team, but they'd assured her it was probably just a coincidence. Still, something about it made her uneasy. That evening, as Emma worked on her advanced mathematics homework at the kitchen table, Maria received a phone call that would once again change everything. The voice on the other end was calm but urgent, speaking words that made her blood run cold. "Mrs. Santos, this is Agent Richardson with the FBI. We need to talk to you about your daughter's involvement with Harrison Tech. There are some people who are very interested in Emma's unique abilities, and they're not all friendly. We think you both might be in danger." Emma looked up from her homework, sensing the tension in her mother's voice. She had learned to read people's emotions with the same precision she applied to scientific problems, and right now her mother was afraid. "What kind of danger?" Maria asked, her hand trembling as she held the phone. "The kind that requires federal protection. Pack a bag, Mrs. Santos. We're coming to get you both tonight." The safe house was nothing like the comfortable home Emma and Maria had grown accustomed to. Hidden in the wooded hills outside Tacoma, the nondescript cabin was surrounded by federal agents who spoke in hushed tones and carried themselves with the alert tension of people expecting trouble. Emma sat by the window, watching the agents patrol the perimeter while her mother paced nervously across the small living room. Agent Richardson, a stern woman in her 40s with kind eyes that contradicted her serious demeanor, spread a series of photographs across the kitchen table. "Mrs. Santos, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Your daughter's breakthrough at Harrison Tech didn't just solve a corporate problem. It revealed a level of intuitive intelligence that certain foreign governments consider a national security asset." Maria sank into a chair, her face pale. "What do you mean? She's just a little girl who notices things." "She's a little girl who solved a problem that stumped some of the world's most advanced quantum computing experts in less than a minute," Agent Richardson replied. "The implications of that capability have not gone unnoticed by countries that would very much like to understand how her mind works." Emma approached the table, studying the photographs with the same analytical focus she brought to everything else. The images showed unfamiliar faces, serious-looking men and women in expensive suits, captured by long-range surveillance cameras. "These people want to hurt us because I helped fix the computer. Not hurt you, Emma. They want to study you, to understand how you process information differently than other people. Some governments have programs designed to identify and recruit individuals with unique cognitive abilities." Agent Richardson's voice was gentle but honest. "We believe they've been watching your family for weeks." The black sedan Maria had noticed outside their house suddenly made terrifying sense. Emma moved to her mother's side, slipping her small hand into Maria's larger one. Despite her young age, she understood the gravity of what they were facing. "How long do we have to stay here?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That depends on several factors," Agent Richardson replied. "Mr. Harrison is working with our cybersecurity division to implement additional safeguards around the quantum technology. If we can make the information less accessible, the interest in Emma might diminish. But there's another complication." She pulled out a tablet and showed them a news article from a major science journal. The headline read, "8-year-old genius revolutionizes quantum computing. The future of problem-solving." Below it was a photo of Emma taken at the Harrison Academy Science Fair, her face clearly visible as she explained her latest project to impress judges. "The story was supposed to be embargoed until next month," Agent Richardson explained. "Someone leaked it early. By tomorrow morning, Emma's face and story will be on the front page of every major newspaper in the world." Emma studied her own image on the screen, understanding intuitively what this meant. Now everyone will know who I am. The bad people won't have to guess anymore. I'm afraid that's right, which is why we need to discuss your options very carefully. Agent Richardson activated a secure communication device. I'm connecting you with Mr. Harrison and some other people who want to help. Jonathan's face appeared on the screen. His usual composed demeanor cracked with worry and guilt. Behind him, Emma could see the familiar conference room where everything had started, now filled with federal agents and cybersecurity experts. Maria, Emma, I am so sorry. This is all my fault. If I hadn't publicized Emma's contribution, none of this would have happened. Mr. Harrison, Emma said, with the directness that had first impressed him years ago, you didn't know this would happen. Sometimes when you try to do good things, bad things happen too. That doesn't mean you should stop trying to do good. The wisdom in those words, coming from an 8-year-old child, silenced the room. Jonathan wiped his eyes, overwhelmed once again by this remarkable little girl who had changed his life in ways he was still discovering. We have a proposal, he continued. It's extreme, but it might be the only way to keep you both safe while allowing Emma to continue developing her extraordinary abilities. Agent Richardson nodded. Emma, how would you feel about becoming someone else for a while? The morning sun filtered through the bulletproof windows of the secure facility in Quantico, Virginia, where Emma Santos was learning to become Lily Chen, a quiet 9-year-old girl from Portland whose family had moved to Virginia for her father's new job with the Department of Defense. The transformation was more than just a new name and backstory. It required Emma to suppress the very curiosity and analytical thinking that made her special. Remember, Lily, Agent Richardson coached during their daily training session, you're a bright child, but not exceptionally so. You get good grades, but you don't solve impossible problems. You ask normal questions that 9-year-olds ask, and you show normal interest in normal things. Emma, now Lily, nodded solemnly, but the conflict was evident in her dark eyes. For weeks, she'd been practicing how to dumb down her responses, how to pretend confusion when complex concepts were discussed, how to blend into the background of academic mediocrity. It was perhaps the most difficult challenge she'd ever faced. What if I forget who I really am? She asked, a question that revealed wisdom far beyond her years. What if I pretend to be normal for so long that I become normal? The question stopped Agent Richardson cold. In all her years of witness protection, she'd never considered that hiding someone's extraordinary abilities might fundamentally change who they were. Lily, Emma, you're asking something that our best psychologists are still debating. We don't know the long-term effects of suppressing exceptional intelligence in someone your age. Maria, who had been watching from the corner of the room, joined the conversation. She too was learning a new identity. Margaret Chen, a quiet bookkeeper who kept to herself and never mentioned her past, as a cleaning lady who'd made a world-changing observation. Mija, maybe being normal for a while isn't such a bad thing. Maybe you can learn what it's like to just be a kid. But Emma understood something her mother didn't. Her mind didn't work like other children's minds. Asking her to think normally was like asking a gifted musician to play only simple melodies, or a natural athlete to always run slowly. It wasn't just hiding her abilities, it was denying her fundamental nature. I want to help people, Emma said quietly. If I pretend to be someone who can't help people, then the people who need help won't get it. Her words hung in the air like an accusation. Agent Richardson pulled up the latest intelligence briefings on her secure tablet. 3 different foreign intelligence services were actively searching for the quantum girl who had revolutionized computer security. Corporate espionage networks were offering 7-figure bounties for information about her whereabouts. Most disturbing of all, criminal organizations had begun targeting other child prodigies, hoping to find the next Emma Santos. There's something else you need to know, Agent Richardson said carefully. Your disappearance has had consequences. Other gifted children around the world are now at risk because people are looking for the next you. Some families have gone into hiding voluntarily. Others haven't been so lucky. Emma's face went pale as she understood the implication. Her gift had not only put her own family in danger, it had created a global hunt for children like her. How many kids are in danger because of me? It's not because of you, Emma. It's because of people who want to exploit what you can do. Agent Richardson showed her photographs of children from different countries. A 10-year-old mathematical prodigy from India, a 12-year-old coding genius from Germany, a 7-year-old pattern recognition specialist from Japan. All had disappeared from their homes in the past month. We think they're being taken to analyze their thinking processes, to see if their abilities can be replicated or enhanced. The agent's voice was grim. You're not just hiding to protect yourself anymore. You're hiding to protect every gifted child in the world. The weight of responsibility settled on Emma's small shoulders like a physical burden. She was 8 years old, but she carried the safety of countless other children in her decision about whether to remain hidden or to use her abilities to help stop the people who were hunting them. What if there was another way? Emma asked slowly, her mind already working through possibilities. What if instead of hiding, we used my abilities to catch the bad people? What if we made it so they couldn't hurt other kids? Agent Richardson and Maria exchanged glances. The child was proposing to use herself as bait in an international intelligence operation. It was brilliant, dangerous, and absolutely impossible to consider. But as Emma continued to outline her reasoning, both women realized that they weren't just listening to a child's naive suggestion. They were hearing a strategic mind that had already identified flaws in their protection plan and was proposing solutions that their best analysts hadn't considered. The 8-year-old girl who had once solved an $800 million problem in 1 minute was about to propose something far more ambitious. A plan to protect every gifted child in the world. The secure conference room in the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit had never hosted such an unusual strategy meeting. Around the polished table sat Agent Richardson, Jonathan Harrison, Dr. Chen, Maria Santos, and at the head of the table, 8-year-old Emma, presenting her plan with the confidence of a seasoned intelligence operative. The mistake everyone is making, Emma explained, using a digital whiteboard to illustrate her points, is thinking that hiding me will make the bad people stop looking for kids like me. But it won't. They know kids like me exist now, so they'll keep looking until they find more of us. Deputy Director Matthews, a grizzled veteran of international counterintelligence, leaned forward skeptically. So, what do you propose, young lady? Emma turned to face him with the same direct gaze that had first impressed Jonathan years ago. We give them what they think they want, but we control how they get it. We let them find me, but we make sure it happens on our terms, in a place where we can catch them. The room fell silent as the implications of her proposal sank in. Maria gripped the arms of her chair, her face pale. Emma, no, you're talking about putting yourself in danger. I'm already in danger, Mama. Every gifted kid in the world is in danger now. This is the only way to make it stop. Emma moved to the next slide of her presentation, revealing intelligence photos of the missing children from around the globe. These kids didn't have a choice. Their families didn't know the danger existed until it was too late. But we do know. We can use that. Jonathan studied the plan with growing amazement. In the past month, while Emma had been learning to hide her abilities, she'd also been analyzing every piece of intelligence they'd shared with her, identifying patterns and connections that their professional analysts had missed. You've identified the recruitment network, he said slowly, pointing to Emma's diagram showing connections between the various kidnappings. This isn't random. They're following a specific pattern, targeting children in a particular sequence. Exactly, Emma confirmed. They're working their way through a list of kids who've been identified through school testing, science fairs, academic competitions, and according to the pattern, I'm not just on the list, I'm at the top of it. Agent Richardson activated her secure communication device, bringing in the FBI's best strategic analysts. Emma, what you're proposing is essentially a counterintelligence operation using a child as the primary asset. Even if the plan is sound, the ethical and legal implications are less important than stopping people who steal children, Emma interrupted with startling firmness. I've been thinking about this for weeks. If we don't act now, more kids will disappear. And eventually, the bad people will figure out how to make more kids like me artificially. Dr. Chen's head snapped up. What do you mean artificially? Emma pulled up her final slide, showing research papers she'd somehow accessed from the secure government databases. Cognitive enhancement through neurological manipulation. Brain surgery to artificially increase pattern recognition and analytical thinking. They're not just kidnapping gifted kids to study them, they're planning to create more. The room erupted in urgent conversations as intelligence analysts confirmed Emma's research. Hidden in classified medical journals and distributed across multiple countries, there was indeed evidence of experimental procedures designed to enhance human cognitive abilities. The implications were terrifying. If successful, it could create armies of artificially enhanced individuals under the control of hostile governments. How did you access these files? Deputy Director Matthews demanded. These databases require the highest security clearances. Emma looked uncomfortable for the first time. I noticed patterns in the login sequences the agents used on their tablets. The passwords followed mathematical progressions that were easy to predict once you understood the algorithm. Agent Richardson rubbed her temples, caught between admiration and exasperation. Emma, you just confessed to hacking federal databases. I was bored, Emma said simply, and I wanted to understand what we were really facing. Mama always taught me that you can't solve a problem until you understand all parts of it. Maria looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. The child who had once carried a simple note about a broken computer clock was now uncovering international conspiracies and proposing counterintelligence operations. The plan has merit, Deputy Director Matthews admitted grudgingly. If we can use Emma to identify and capture the recruitment network, we could not only rescue the missing children, but prevent future kidnappings. But the risk is acceptable, Emma said firmly, because doing nothing guarantees that more children will be hurt, and if they succeed in creating artificial versions of kids like me, the whole world will be in danger. As the meeting adjourned to allow the adults to debate the ethics and feasibility of Emma's proposal, Jonathan approached her quietly. Emma, what you're suggesting is incredibly brave, but also incredibly dangerous. Are you sure you understand what you're asking for? Emma looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too old for her 8-year-old face. Mr. Harrison, 2 years ago I helped you save $800 million by noticing something simple. Now, I want to help save something more important than money. I want to save the other kids who think differently, who see things other people miss. Isn't that worth the risk? Looking into those serious dark eyes, Jonathan realized that Emma Santos had already made her decision. The only question now was whether the adults around her would have the courage to support it. The abandoned warehouse in the industrial district of Baltimore looked exactly like the kind of place where international criminals would conduct their illegal operations. What it actually contained was the most sophisticated surveillance and tactical operation in FBI history, with Emma Santos, now operating under her real name for the first time in months, sitting calmly in the center of it all, waiting for the moment that would determine the fate of gifted children worldwide. Targets are approaching the perimeter. Agent Richardson's voice crackled through the hidden earpieces worn by the tactical team. Emma, remember, you don't have to prove anything to these people. Just be yourself. That's dangerous enough. Emma adjusted the small device hidden in her jacket pocket, a quantum processor she and Dr. Chen had modified to demonstrate her abilities in the most impressive way possible. Around her, the warehouse had been staged to look like a makeshift laboratory, where a brilliant child might be working on advanced projects. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was using her real abilities to pretend to be herself. "I'm scared, but I'm ready," Emma whispered into her concealed microphone. "Are Mama and Mr. Harrison safe? Your mother and Jonathan are in the secondary command center, completely secure," Agent Richardson assured her. "Emma, if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you give us the signal and we extract you immediately." The warehouse doors opened with a metallic screech, and 3 figures entered, 2 men in expensive suits and a woman carrying what appeared to be medical equipment. These weren't the thugs Emma had expected. They looked like doctors, scientists, people who should have been helping children rather than exploiting them. "Miss Santos," the woman called out, her voice carrying a slight accent Emma couldn't identify. "My name is Dr. Kovac. We've been very eager to meet you." Emma stood slowly, letting them see both her youth and her composure. "I know who you are. You're the people who've been taking kids like me." Her voice was steady, but she made sure to let a hint of fear show through. It would seem suspicious if she appeared too confident. "Taking is such an ugly word," Dr. Kovac replied, approaching with the careful movements of someone trying not to spook a wild animal. "We prefer to think of it as recruiting exceptional individuals for important work. Work that could change the world. The world doesn't need to be changed by stealing children," Emma said, backing toward the workstation they'd prepared for her. "If you want to help kids with abilities like mine, there are better ways." One of the men stepped forward aggressively. "Listen, little girl, you're coming with us whether you want to or not. We've invested too much time and money finding you to—" "Victor!" "Stop!" Dr. Kovac interrupted sharply. "Miss Santos, please forgive my colleague. He doesn't understand that exceptional minds require exceptional respect." She turned back to Emma with what was probably meant to be a reassuring smile. "We're not here to force you to do anything. We simply want to understand how your mind works. Think of it as advanced education." Emma moved to her workstation, where the modified quantum processor hummed quietly. This was the moment that would determine whether her plan succeeded or failed. "You want to see how my mind works? I'll show you." She activated the device, and the warehouse filled with the soft glow of quantum field generators. On the monitors around her workstation, complex equations began scrolling past at impossible speeds, while the processor solved calculations that should have taken supercomputers hours to complete. "This is what I built in the 3 months you've been looking for me," Emma said, her voice taking on the confidence of someone demonstrating their masterpiece. "A quantum consciousness interface. It doesn't just process information, it processes thought itself." Dr. Kovac's eyes widened as she watched the displays. The readings were beyond anything their research had suggested was possible. How did you develop this?" "Our best scientists have been working on quantum neural interfaces for years without success." "Because your scientists think like adults," Emma replied. "They try to force the technology to work the way they think it should work. I just asked the technology what it wanted to do, and then I listened to the answer." Hidden in the warehouse rafters, Agent Richardson watched through high-powered scopes as the 3 criminals gathered around Emma's demonstration, completely mesmerized by what they were seeing. The child's performance was flawless. She was giving them enough genuine innovation to convince them of her value while carefully avoiding anything that could actually be used to harm others. "She's magnificent, Doctor." Kovac breathed, studying the readouts. "Victor, contact the extraction team. We need to move her to the primary facility immediately." "Actually," Emma said quietly, "I have a better idea. Instead of you taking me somewhere, why don't you tell me where you've taken the other kids? The ones you grabbed before you found me?" The temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop several degrees as the 3 criminals realized that their prey had just revealed teeth. "What other kids?" Dr. Kovac asked carefully, but Emma could see the calculation in her eyes. The sudden awareness that something was very wrong with this scenario. The mathematical prodigy from Mumbai, the coding genius from Berlin, the pattern specialist from Tokyo. Emma's voice was no longer that of a frightened child. It carried the authority of someone who had already solved the puzzle. Did you really think I wouldn't figure out that you've been systematically kidnapping gifted children for months? Victor reached inside his jacket. But before he could draw whatever weapon he was carrying, the warehouse erupted in tactical lights and armed agents emerging from every concealment point. In less than 30 seconds, the three criminals were on the ground in restraints, while Emma stood calmly amid the chaos, still protected by the circle of federal agents who had been ready to give their lives to keep her safe. "Dr. Kovac," Emma said as the woman was lifted to her feet. "Now you're going to tell us where those children are, and you're going to help us understand exactly how many other people are involved in stealing kids like me." The woman looked at Emma with something that might have been respect mixed with genuine fear. "You're not just gifted, are you? You're something entirely new." Emma met her gaze with the same directness that had first impressed Jonathan Harrison years ago. "I'm exactly what I've always been. A kid who notices things and asks questions. The only difference is that now I'm asking questions that are going to save other kids." As the prisoners were led away and the warehouse team began securing evidence, Agent Richardson approached Emma with an expression of profound relief mixed with awe. "Emma, what you just did, it's going to protect gifted children around the world for years to come." "No," Emma corrected her quietly. "What we just did is the beginning. Now comes the hard part, finding all the children they took and making sure this never happens again." 6 months after the warehouse operation that dismantled an international network of child traffickers, Emma Santos stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York, addressing world leaders about the protection of gifted children. At 9 years old, she was the youngest person ever to speak before the full assembly, but her words carried the weight of someone who had faced dangers most adults could never imagine. "Distinguished delegates," Emma began, her clear voice carrying through the vast hall filled with representatives from 193 countries. "I stand before you not just as a child who was fortunate enough to escape those who would exploit young minds, but as the voice of every gifted child who needs protection from those who see unusual abilities as opportunities for profit or power." In the audience, Maria Santos sat between Jonathan Harrison and Agent Richardson, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter address the most powerful people in the world. The little girl who had once carried a crumpled note about a broken computer had become a global advocate for the protection of exceptional children. "Since our operation in Baltimore," Emma continued, "international law enforcement has rescued 47 children from 12 countries. These children had been taken from their families and subjected to procedures designed to enhance or study their cognitive abilities. Some were as young as 5 years old. The assembly hall was silent except for the soft clicking of cameras and the muted conversations of translators. Emma's presentation included photographs, carefully anonymized to protect the rescued children, showing the facilities where they had been held and the equipment that had been used on them. "But rescue is only the first step," Emma said, advancing to her next slide. "Prevention requires something much more difficult, changing how we think about children who are different. In my case, my abilities were first noticed not by teachers or scientists, but by my mother, who listened when I pointed out something that seemed wrong. Maria Santos, a cleaning lady, created the conditions that led to my gift being recognized and nurtured rather than ignored or exploited." She gestured toward her mother in the audience. "The first line of defense for gifted children isn't security systems or government protection. It's adults who pay attention, who listen, and who understand that unusual questions deserve serious answers rather than dismissal." The Secretary General leaned forward, clearly impressed by Emma's analysis. "Miss Santos, what specific recommendations do you have for the international community?" Emma had been preparing for this question for months. "First, we need educational systems that identify and protect gifted children without making them targets. Second, we need international cooperation to track and prevent the exploitation of children with exceptional abilities. And third, we need to remember that being gifted doesn't make children less human. It makes them more vulnerable. She paused, looking out over the assembly with the same analytical gaze that had first solved Harrison Tech's quantum computing problem. But most importantly, we need to understand that gifts like mine aren't rare accidents. They're natural variations in human intelligence that deserve protection and development, not fear or exploitation. Dr. Chen, who was in the audience as part of the Harrison Tech delegation, marveled at how Emma had evolved from a child who solved technical problems into someone who could address global policy issues with equal sophistication. The quantum consciousness interface she had demonstrated in the warehouse had indeed been functional. It was now being used by researchers worldwide to accelerate medical and scientific research, all under careful ethical oversight. The children who were rescued, Emma continued, are not victims to be pitied. They are young people with extraordinary potential who deserve the chance to develop their abilities in safety and freedom. Some want to become scientists, others artists, others teachers. What they all have in common is the right to choose their own futures, rather than having those futures determined by people who see them as resources to be exploited. As Emma concluded her presentation, the assembly rose in spontaneous applause, something virtually unprecedented for a speaker who wasn't a head of state. But the delegates understood they had just witnessed something remarkable, a child who had transformed her own exploitation into a platform for protecting others. Later that evening, in their hotel suite overlooking Central Park, Emma sat with her mother and Jonathan, reflecting on the day's events. The formal dinner with world leaders was over, the interviews with international media completed, and for the first time in months, Emma could simply be a 9-year-old girl. "Mija," Maria said softly, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't written that note about the computer clock?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I think you would have found another way to help people." "Mom, and I would have found another way to use my abilities. The important thing wasn't the specific problem we solved. It was that we were both willing to speak up when we noticed something wrong." Jonathan watched this exchange with the same sense of wonder he'd felt that first day in the conference room. Emma's gifts had indeed saved his company $800 million, but that was the least important thing she'd accomplished. She had taught him to listen, to recognize wisdom wherever it might appear, and to understand that the most valuable insights often came from the most unexpected sources. "What's next for us?" he asked, genuinely curious about what challenges Emma might tackle next. Emma smiled, the first completely carefree expression she'd shown all day. "I want to go back to school and learn more about quantum physics, and I want to help design better security systems to protect other kids like me." And she paused, looking out at the lights of New York City. "I want to figure out how to make sure that every child who sees the world differently gets the chance to share what they see." As the city sparkled below them, the three of them understood that they had witnessed something larger than a corporate recovery or even an international rescue operation. They had seen how a simple willingness to listen, to observe, and to act on what seemed right could change not just individual lives, but the entire world. Emma Santos had solved her first impossible problem at age 6 with a minute of careful observation. At 9, she was solving much larger problems with the same tools: curiosity, honesty, and the unshakable belief that every person, no matter how young or powerless they might seem, had something valuable to contribute. The little girl, who had once carried her mother's note in a small backpack, was now carrying the hopes of gifted children worldwide, and she was more than ready for whatever challenges tomorrow might bring.